A height of New York's skyscraper race, no one had ever seen a tower crane, yet 700-foot giants rose above these very streets. I am Era, and today we'll uncover how they built the impossible.
It was 1930. The Great Depression was strangling America, but in the heart of Manhattan, a giant was rising. The Empire State Building. This wasn't just a construction site. It was a race against time, a war with gravity, and a statement of absolute power. While the world below was standing in breadlines, up here, men were playing a high-stakes game where the sky was the limit, and the floor was 1,000 feet of empty air. They were building at a pace that modern engineering still finds impossible to believe. Welcome to the birth of the Iron Code.
People see the beauty of the skyline, but they have the speed that created it. It was a factory in the sky, and every second cost a fortune.
But building at this speed was a dance with death. A 4-man rivet gang could sink over 500 red-hot bolts a day, throwing and catching them in midair with nothing but tin cans. One wrong move, and a glowing piece of steel becomes a lethal projectile falling toward the streets of Manhattan. In 1930, the Empire State Building rose at a rate of 4.5 floors per week. That's not just construction, it's a factory moving toward the clouds. But who were the men behind this mechanical miracle, and what was the Iron Code they lived by?
People think these men were just desperate workers. But there was a secret. The best of the best were the Mohawk Indians. They had a code that made them invisible to fear.
Legend says the Mohawks were born without the fear of heights. But the truth is deeper. For them, the steel beam was a path of their ancestors. They didn't use safety harnesses because they believed a man tied to a rope had already lost his soul to death. The Iron Code was simple. Trust only your grip and your brother. If one fell, his brother took his place, literally. This wasn't just work. It was a ritual of absolute trust performed 800 feet above the concrete jungle. Why did they do it? The answer lies in the cold psychology of dominance. In an era where the world was collapsing, the giants of industry wanted to prove they were untouchable. They weren't just building offices. They were constructing monuments to their own invincibility. The height of a building was the exact measure of their ego. Chrysler hid a secret spire to surprise the world, but the Empire State answered with raw, impossible speed. While the masses stood in breadlines, these titans were buying a place in eternity, looking down from a throne of silver and steel. This race was a war of vanities, paid for with the lives of those who caught white-hot rivets with tin cans. True power doesn't ask for permission. It simply rises above the ruins.
True status is never about showing off. It's about the quiet confidence to build something that lasts forever. Just like the Iron Code.
But there is a darker side to this architectural triumph. The Iron Code was more than just a set of unwritten rules. It was a psychological cage designed to eliminate the very instinct of self-preservation. On the heights of the Empire State, fear was treated like a contagious disease. If a man hesitated on a beam, he was replaced before his feet even touched the ground. This wasn't just about construction. It was a brutal meritocracy, where your value was measured in the number of red-hot rivets you could drive while balancing on a 6-inch ledge. The owners didn't just buy labor, they bought absolute fearlessness. They knew that a man who values his life is a man who asks for safety. And in 1930, safety was a luxury that cost too much time. The true intrigue of the code lies in why these men stayed. It was the toxic allure of being part of the elite of the sky. A secret society that laughed at death while the rest of the world lived in the shadows of the Great Depression. This is the dark secret of high-status projects. They make the danger feel like a privilege, turning the exploited into the proud. Tell me, are you really at the top of your game? Or have you just been convinced that the risk is your only reward? The Empire State Building was completed in record time, but the Iron Code didn't die with the last rivet. It simply evolved. It migrated from the rusted steel beams of 1930 to the glass boardrooms of today. The structures changed, but the brutal psychology of power remained. Most people look at this monument and see a piece of history, but you should see a blueprint. The heights are still waiting. The real question isn't whether you have the skill to climb, it's whether you are building your own empire or sweating on the scaffolding of someone else's dream. Because today, the Iron Code isn't written in steel. It's written in the contracts you sign and the risks you dare to take. Let's look at how this same cold logic is building the trillion-dollar empire. To understand the Iron Code, you have to look at the machines that made it possible. By the 1920s, the sky wasn't being conquered by men alone, but by a terrifying hybrid of flesh and steam. The steam-powered derrick was the heart of the skyscraper. It was a 20-ton predator of steel that demanded absolute precision. Imagine balancing on a wet beam, 300 meters above the pavement, while a massive derrick swings a 5-ton girder toward your chest. There were no radios, no safety lights, only hand signals and the scream of pressurized steam. This was the war of the sky. The Titans, Chrysler, Raskob, and Woolworth didn't just want buildings. They wanted a rate of speed that broke the laws of physics. They treated the Rivet gangs like a biological engine. If the engine smoked, you didn't fix it. You replaced the parts. A man was just a part. But here's the hook. The faster they worked, the more the workers felt like gods. They weren't just laborers. They were the only creatures on Earth who could tame the steel giants, and the owners knew exactly how to use that pride to keep them. By late 1930, the Iron Code faced its ultimate test. This wasn't just construction. It was a high-stakes poker game played in the clouds. Walter Chrysler was winning. He had just secretly added a stainless steel spire to his tower, making it the tallest in the world. He thought he had won. But John Raskob and his architect had a darker plan. They realized that in the race for the skyline, the winner isn't the one who works hardest, but the one who hides their intentions best. Deep inside the steel skeleton of the Empire State, they were hiding a secret. A 60-ton dirigible mooring mast. It was built entirely in secret, hidden from public view behind the upper floors of scaffolding. While Chrysler celebrated at the bottom, the Iron Code workers were silent. They were preparing to strike. On a cold morning, they released the secret. In just a few days, the Empire State Building literally grew. It didn't just pass Chrysler. It buried his ego under 20 stories of additional steel. This is how empires are built, with a cold heart and a hidden blade. But the cost of this deception was about to be paid in blood. The Empire State Building was never about architecture. It was a 102-story transaction, paid for in blood and iron to cement a legacy. The Titans of that era understood one thing. The world doesn't belong to those who follow the rules, but to those who have the coldness to rewrite them. They didn't build a skyscraper. They built a monument to their own dominance. Today, the dust has settled on the steel, but the logic remains unchanged. The Iron Code isn't history. It's a filter. It separates the men who occupy the space from the men who own the skyline. Most will watch this and see a story of the past. The few will see a blueprint for their own expansion. The heights are always open for those with the stomach for the climb.